So this is the Ridgid 3H drive Octane model impact wrench, and this is the third 3H drive impact wrench video I've made. First was the DeWalt, then the Ryobi, now this Ridgid, and you can see in the video that it does do quite a bit of stuff fairly good, and it sheared those cotter pins right off on those castle nut joints, like the ball joint, what was it, the tie rod and the upper control arm nut. And it can do quite a bit of stuff, but it did struggle on a lot of stuff that's really important for these smaller impact wrenches to be able to do. And the most important one for me, I think, is being able to undo the caliper bracket bolts. So a lot of people who buy these are going to buy them to use them in tight spots. So going behind the knuckle and being able to undo those two caliper bracket bolts is really important. And it was able to undo the caliper bolts, no problem, just not the caliper bracket bolts. And that's kind of an issue, because you're going to either have to take out a 1/2 inch drive impact to undo them, or another more powerful impact, or you're going to have to undo them with the wrench or breaker bar. And this just could not, it didn't seem to be able to handle them reliably. It did undo a couple, but many it couldn't do. But surprisingly, it was able to use the extension, the swivel sockets. It had no real big issue. And you saw that shear those cotter pins, no problem. So it did a lot of stuff pretty good. It just was not very reliable. It just does not have that kind of power to be used as a, reliable mechanic tool, I think. So what I think it is basically another impact driver converted to an impact wrench. It does say 190 foot-pounds. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Who knows? The fact is, you saw in the video, it couldn't undo quite a few fasteners. What you'll notice at first is I tossed the 2 amp hour right away, put the 4 amp hour on. So I knew somebody's going to say you should have used the Octane battery, or you should have used the 4 amp hour. So right away I put the 4 amp hour battery on. That whole video, except I think the first clip, was all 4 amp hour battery. And while it is more powerful with the 4 amp hour battery, it still struggled. Now, if you watch the DeWalt video and the Ryobi video, both of those, I went for caliper bracket bolts in both those videos. In the DeWalt video, I didn't focus too much on those bolts because it was my first time doing a 3H drive video, but in the Ryobi video, I did focus on the caliper bracket bolts, and the Ryobi struggled a lot. It could not undo, I don't think it undid any caliper bracket bolts, right? So this did a lot better than the DeWalt and the Ryobi. So out of those three, I would definitely go for this one. But again, it seems quite a bit underpowered to be doing automotive stuff around the suspension. Now, I guess if your car is not rusted and you don't really deal with that kind of corrosion, it shouldn't really have an issue undoing bracket bolts or suspension bolts or anything like that. But if you deal with a lot of corrosion and seized up stuff, this is probably not the tool for you. I don't think it'd have any issue in the engine bay or interior or other smaller suspension stuff like brake line, little 10 mil, 12 mil, 13 mil. You saw it ripped out that sway bar bolt, no problem. That's all rusted up, no real issue. So it didn't have big issue with the extension. It seemed to work real nice with the extension, actually kind of better than the Ryobi. Those Ryobis never liked extensions, but this thing didn't seem to have a big issue. And you saw it was able to shear off those cotter pins on doing those castle nuts from the tie rod and upper control arm, no issue. And it was able to use the swivel sockets, no issue. So it did a lot of things good. It's just a little bit underpowered and you know, kind of hit and miss just based on the low power rating coming out of this tool. Maybe it will do a lot better with the Octane battery, but I don't have one of those batteries to try. But the way it's set up right here, it is quite a bit underpowered. But again, out of the three, DeWalt, Ryobi, and this Ridgid, I thought this one was probably the best one. Other than that, you know, not much. You know, again, that DeWalt is probably the smallest, but it is really way underpowered. This is way more powerful than that DeWalt. And the size difference between this and the DeWalt is not much. But the size difference between this and the Ryobi is huge. I'll put a picture up and you can see how much a difference there is between this and the Ryobi. So, and I do love Ridgid stuff. I have the Ridgid Sawzall, and it's probably, you know, one of my favorite tools. I use that Sawzall all the time, and I think it's amazing. So, you know, if this is half as reliable as that Sawzall, it'd be great. One thing I did notice, you know, this tool's brand new. I just got this. Who knows, maybe a couple of weeks. You can see here that this plate for the front, the three LEDs, it's kind of separating. Now, I don't know if that is, you can see there's a gap here, but not much. Oh, maybe, yeah, it's a little bit smaller in the size, so I'm not sure if that's because it was banging around the suspension or what. Maybe that's how it is. Yeah, maybe that's how it is, because I always get questions about these front LED plates, if they're strong, if they come out. I've never had an issue with one falling off, but that is something I did notice, that this side is a little bit you know, farther out, but that just might be how it is. I never noticed it before until looking at it right now, because I was a little bit rough with it. Now, one thing I can tell you is this light, you'll notice it in the video, it is not bright enough. 3 LEDs and they are not bright at all. I don't know why the Milwaukees and the Ridgids have these really poor lights on them, especially the Milwaukees. They're completely useless. You'll see in the video, you can't really, the light barely does anything. It has to be, you know, a much brighter light. Like the DeWalts have really bright lights, and it's just a gimmick having 3 lights on there that are barely as bright as one DeWalt, and it cannot light up the dark areas. Even with those 3 lights, it's a struggle. So I don't know why those 2 companies keep putting on these really dimly lit lights that it doesn't make any sense. But other than that, I like the impact.